How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the very first episode of Feel the Heat, a 5 Reasons Sports podcast on the Miami Heat and everything Heat culture. I am one of two hosts, Michael Christian. I am joined by...
Allana Tachauer. What's up, y'all?
What's up, y'all? That's what you decided to go with for the intro on episode 1.
Listen, you're really going to bust my balls this early on in the episode. We know I'm not good with intros. We're going to work on it, though, folks. I'm confident in my abilities. Michael doesn't seem like he is, though.
I apologize for her language, folks. We were going to try to keep this PG, and that went out the window within the first about minute, apparently. So that's completely gone.
You should have known better. Come on.
Oh, brother. If you guys are still listening, thank you for staying on, even though she totally messed that whole thing up. But like I said, this is called Feel the Heat. It's a 5 Reasons Sports podcast. The first thing we wanted to talk about was, why is this show called Feel the Heat? Allana, would you like to let them know why we picked that name?
Well, apparently there is a particular song that I missed the memo on and that Michael has been roasting me over for a good week plus now. So for all of you who are not as ignorant as I am, you should be able to make the connection. But Michael, I want to give a little bit of a rundown because apparently I don't know about this.
So 1997, N-Focus does a song called Can You Feel the Heat? It becomes the theme song for the Miami Heat. There's this really hilarious video that is so perfectly 90s because they have like their Walkman headphones and they're like kind of jamming out to it, and it like cuts between black and white and color, and it's like slow-mo moments that don't need to be slow-mo. It's a fantastic video. It's a hilarious song. It's a really good song and something that I feel like any Miami Heat fan should know. But Allana, you don't, which really throws your entire Heat fandom into question.
I didn't. Past tense here. I didn't, because you enlightened me. And I will agree, the video was monumental. That alone sold me on the song. But I mean, look, now it brought us together on this pod. So it has more meaning than ever.
And I'm glad you said that, because literally if it wasn't for that song, I wouldn't be doing this podcast with you. Like,
you secretly hate me, or not so secretly.
No, it's very overt, and everybody's going to know that if they listen to this. And in the first minute, they caught it. So this is going to be great. This is going to be a good time. But, you know, we talk about becoming Heat fans and how I know the song from 1997, even though at the time I was 4, you were, I don't know, maybe deep into high school or whatever it is with your age. We don't know. But
that will be the biggest kept secret of this pod. Let's see how long I can keep this up.
Eventually someone's going to Google you and find it, because I'm sure it's somewhere on the internet.
But my history is a little tricky. There's some gaps there. One of my best friends, actually, I knew her for about a year. And one day in the shower, it dawned on her that she couldn't quite figure out how old I was. So if someone in my life for a year needed time, I don't feel like the rest of the people are going to be able to pick up that quickly.
Well, good luck to everyone else finding it. I'm sure the people that know, the small handful, will eventually release it. I don't know at what point in your life you were at in 1997.
Listen, I'm big on blackmail. No one is going to cross me. If you know my age, anyone out there better keep quiet.
Man, people are really getting a full feel for this show, and I don't even know at what point into the show we are. Like, I don't have a minute timer here, so I can't be like, hey, we're 5 minutes in, we've already hit that. Like, I have no idea. So again, thank you guys so much for sticking around so far. Like, this is great. But hey, Feel the Heat. We are Heat fans. This is all going to be a show about, you know, Miami Heat culture, both on and off the court, what it means to us, kind of lightly touching on what's going on with the games. Neither of us is very big on analysis. We both know we can do it, and we like talking about the game, but I don't feel like I'm a Nikias Duncan or anything like that knows these really deep stats and understands the small intricacies of a zone defense. Allana, do you feel like you know all that stuff?
Listen, numbers are hard for me. I am a words kind of girl. So box scores and the likes of that are definitely not my forte. So we're going to stick to what we're both good at.
Exactly, which is just the eye test. And eventually we'll do an episode on the eye test versus stats. I think there's a place for both, but maybe we'll pick controversial sides and we'll just argue over it like we argue over everything else.
You and me argue? Never.
You in saying that, you've started up another argument. Literally just started up another argument.
It is what I do best.
So if you guys aren't seeing it already, this is kind of the feel of the show. We're going to disagree on almost everything we talk about. We both love the Miami Heat to death, but where that began is completely different for the both of us. I'll go first on this one. I'll kind of give my journey on the Heat, because I think it's much more similar to a lot of Heat fans that are going to be listening to this podcast, that watch all the stuff we do on 5 Reasons. So I was born and raised in Miami. My dad raised me with one very simple mindset, and that is you are a fan of the teams that are in your city, and that is it. You don't cop out. You don't jump ship to another team to be like,
you're already throwing shade at me, and it's like 1 minute into your story.
and
not even.
the thing is, I wasn't though. That was just genuinely what he told me. I am not like no cap.
So your shade is
100%.
just organic towards me at this point, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely, because
Okay,
one is
great.
right and one is wrong.
Sure.
So I was raised to be a Miami fan for everything. And obviously, I'm not a bandwagon fan because if anybody on here listening knows anything about Miami sports, they're all terrible. Outside of the Miami Heat, the last 2 decades, and even then it had its ups and downs, there's really not much else going on in South Florida. The last time the Marlins won was 2003. The Dolphins are completely useless. Goodness gracious, that hurts my heart. The Panthers technically don't even play in Miami. The Hurricanes haven't won since 2001. It is rough. It is rough times out there, but I will never jump ship. I will never be a fan of another team more than these. Will I like other teams? Sure. For example, I went out to school on the West Coast. I like the Portland Trailblazers. Right there.
As
in
do
my
I.
head,
Something we have in common, actually.
yeah, in my head, they're like my second team. I think you're allowed to have a second team, but my priorities are very clearly aligned. If it takes the Portland Trailblazers never winning a game again for the Miami Heat to win a championship, 100%, I'll take that every day of the week. So Miami Heat was kind of ingrained in me from the start. We were a fan ever since I was born. Granted, it took a while for me to understand basketball and understand sports and really what was going on. I was lucky enough to, and I remember this specifically, I was there in the living room with my dad when Dwayne Wade got drafted. And I remember Dwayne Wade's name gets announced, and my dad, because again, at this point, I don't know enough about basketball to make my own judgment. My dad is like, what? They took another tweener guard? What are we doing? And I don't blame him. At the time, the team had Eddie Jones and a bunch of other guards, and I will not say that I know every single one of them because I don't. He wanted Chris Bosh. My dad wanted Chris Bosh. Everybody knows that Pat Riley kind of wanted Chris Bosh too. It was like, who's this Dwayne Wade kid? Like, sure, he had a decent time in the Final Four, but what's really going on here? Anybody that says that they knew for a fact Dwayne Wade was going to be this ultra superstar, not the fact, but Dwayne Wade joining the team, I actually met him at Dolphin Mall probably within the next year, got his autograph, became a huge fan from that, and my Heat fandom just kind of took off. Then they get Shaquille O'Neal. It becomes easy to be a Heat fan with that 2005 and the 2006 season. So it just kind of took off from there. But that is kind of the beginning of how I became a Heat fan. I was born into it, but then it became what felt like my own thing with Wade, Shaq, and a team that I was like, this is nuts. Nobody thought that team had a chance, and they did, and it was fantastic to be along for the ride. But Allana, your story is basically completely different from that, isn't it?
I do have one quick question for you. Did you have a Heat onesie? And if so, are there pictures?
I don't think I had a Heat onesie. I do know this, though. My parents have told me this before. They bought me Jordans when I was a baby, like between the age of 0 and 2, somewhere in that range. There were these like little Jordan shoes that they made for babies, and I wore them, and my parents eventually threw them out. And
I was gonna say, do you still have them? They should have held on to them.
It was the 90s, right? Nobody knew, how valuable shoes could become. So it was just, we just got them from Jordan, so we got rid of them. My dad actually talks about it now. He's like, I think if we had saved those shoes, they would be worth a decent amount of money. Also, they'd just be cool to have. But I did have baby Jordans, so I'll take that.
What was your first Heat jersey? My only other follow-up question.
I've actually only ever owned one player's Heat jersey, and that is Dwayne Wade. I bought a Dwayne Wade jersey probably in like 2005, but I've literally never bought another player's jersey for the Miami Heat other than one of the most recent. Yeah, exactly. I bought a Depot jersey because I'm all in on the Depot trade, but we can save that talk for another time. But yeah, Dwayne Wade was the first one.
All right. Well, I mean, I will say we have the Dwayne Wade thing in common. Other than that, my story is completely different. I grew up, and I will age myself a little bit now, but in the golden era of the Bulls. So my parents were into it. I know. You're only booing because of Vooch, though. You don't really have a hatred towards the Bulls otherwise, do you? Or are you hanging on to Wade coming here?
No, there's a mixture of things. It was Wade going there. It was them taking Vooch, Derrick Rose taking an MVP from LeBron when he clearly didn't deserve it. Look, there's a lot of things. Also, an entire organization that was built on one player who got, I won't slander Michael Jordan. He is at worst the number 2 basketball player of all time. that is a discussion for another time. I'm sure a lot of people are
Sure
going to hate it,
is.
but,
Yep.
but, I'm just a Heat fan. I have watched highlights of the old Bulls versus Heat games, in the mid to late 90s. I know it's not the same, but I just don't like them. Okay. When LeBron came here, the Bulls were like that first in line rival. They suck. They then took Dwayne Wade. That's it. You're dead to me.
I mean, I will have to stand by Chicago as a city, but I don't have to stand by the Bulls as an organization. And lucky for you, because while I did grow up a Bulls fan, I kind of stepped away from just NBA fandom in general. I don't know, life happened and I didn't really follow the game. Except weirdly enough, when I was in middle school, I only followed two college players, and that was Carmelo Anthony, that I swore I would name my son after. Literally swore. I was like, I'm going to have a son, and his name is going to be Melo. Fast forward to now, when everyone who knows me knows I do not want kids, so I don't know what happened there. But Melo and Dwayne Wade, only two players I followed. So after, obviously, the Heat drafted Wade, while I was still a Bulls fan, kind of to your point, I had a number 2 team. That number 2 team consistently was the Miami Heat. I did mostly ride or die for the Bulls for a little bit. When Derrick Rose got drafted, I know, I'm so sorry. Michael's rolling his eyes for everyone who can't see. I worked with, NBC Sports Now, Comcast Sportsnet back in the day. I interned with them. I was covering the Bulls. And then slowly but surely, the more I learned about the organization and the more that the Bulls honestly kind of ended up sucking, I just slowly transferred over to a Miami Heat fan, and I've been ride or die ever since.
Oh, so when it became easy to be a fan of the Heat because the Bulls were bad and the Heat were good, it was like, well, I can just jump over there.
Well, maybe, but I will say 2 things. First of all, I'm still around, and we have been through some ups and downs lately. And second of all, before anyone goes and finds some past tweets of mine, I'm going to put this out there because I know someone is going to dig this up. I was not a big fan of the Big Three in the very beginning. I thought it was a cop-out. I didn't like the fact that LeBron and Bosh came over to help Wade. I wanted Wade to do it all by himself. However, I know Michael looks like he's going to pass out. I know. I just want to get this out there.
Listen, you know what? We're going to have a whole episode dedicated to the early 2010s in the Miami Heat because it needs it, because you, ma'am, are speaking heresy. And if people let you stay a Heat fan after this, I will be shocked.
In my defense, it was because I did not want Wade's legacy and whatever happened next to be overshadowed by LeBron and Bosh. I was a huge LeBron fan. I really did like Bosh as well. I just wanted Wade to keep having something on his own. But quickly, honestly, within a few months, I mean, how can you not be sold? It was like the most fun basketball I had watched in a very long time. And then afterwards, I was all in through the roller coaster that has been Miami Heat ever since.
My goodness, did you just give me a ton of ideas for episodes? I mean, I had one too, right? We talked about Michael Jordan versus LeBron James, which we'll have that debate, and I think we should, regardless of culture and all that.
I'm gonna have to pull out some wine for that one because I can only imagine what's coming my way.
Well, then I'm going to need some really heavy illegal drugs for whatever the hell you have to say about the 2010 to 14 Miami Heat, because that, ma'am, was a hell of a ride. And
I agree.
One of the most fun times I ever had as a Heat fan. So
it only took me a few months. I just want to be honest because I know how Heat Twitter is, okay? One of you as you're listening right now are probably going to go back and find some tweets of mine. So I wanted to get ahead of this.
I mean, you also kind of sent them to it. Like, I don't think people would have really done too much digging. And then you said,
I don't know. If people like their historical data, Michael.
I don't think they like it that much. 10 years back? No shot. But hey, that is kind of how we got brought into Heat culture. But we call it Heat culture. Culture is a funny word. It's not easy to define. I mean, we can look up Webster's. We can look up Webster's dictionary, right? See what they have to say about it and start it off like a terrible valedictorian speech in a high school. But culture can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and the way they interpret it is completely different. So, Allana, what is it about the Heat that has made you stay? Because obviously you seem like a fair weather fan, right? The Bulls were bad, so you jumped to the Heat. When the Heat are bad, you stayed with them. Was it culture? Was it something else? What was going on? And what is culture to you?
I'm going to ignore the shade and just proceed to answer your question. Culture is hard to define, and I think, especially as a Heat fan, culture has just become the identity of the team. So they're kind of just synonymous at this point. I think culture is kind of the chemistry built between the guys. I think it's the drive, the work ethic, just kind of the mindset. I think there's nobody that exemplifies Heat culture more than Pat Riley in my eyes. He is honestly my life's idol. And I know that a lot of people are going to now make the joke of, what about your parents? And I love my parents. However, that is a given. Outside of them, Pat Riley is just someone that I really, really look up to. I think he, throughout the years, has just shown nothing but loyalty and dedication, and just the willingness to grow players and develop them. And I think that's a huge part of it too. I think player development is bar none. So I just think that it's hard to define other than just saying it's the identity of this organization. And I think that's why Heat fandom is so unique.
Yeah, and I think, that culture, we've talked about it. It's hard to define. You talked about a lot of points, and obviously Pat Riley is a big part of that. And we can actually talk about that in a second here, because I think you can't talk about Heat culture without talking about Pat Riley. Mm-hmm. But to me, what I love about Heat culture, what really stands out to me is I feel like Heat culture is everything that isn't innate, everything that isn't God-given. LeBron James is a very, very good basketball player. Michael Jordan, very good basketball player. They were incredibly skilled. They worked hard. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to take that away from them. But to me, Heat culture is taking a player who may not have the best talent and the most skills in the world and really elevating him to the next level, because you instill a work ethic that he wouldn't get anywhere else. Mm-hmm. Like, you think of a player like Udonis Haslam. Udonis Haslam was a big dude back in his University of Florida days. He came to the Miami Heat. He lost a ton of that weight. He had already started working on that, I'm sure, but the Miami Heat definitely helped instill that. Udonis Haslam, to me, is a perfect embodiment of Miami Heat culture. And I understand a lot of people would argue that and say Alonzo Mourning. And Alonzo Mourning is probably the first on-court embodiment of that. But to me, Udonis Haslam has so much less talent. He has so much less skill than an Alonzo Mourning did. Alonzo Mourning was already great somewhere else, and he came to the Heat and he was elevated. He was taken to another place. But Udonis Haslam, without that work ethic, without the hustle, fighting for the rebound, the scrappy play, the uniting with your guys, that to me is Heat culture, and that's what it screams to me. It's those moments where they beat another team, not because they're better than them, but because they out-hustled them, which then leads even more to such frustrating moments that have happened this season. We'll talk about it later in the show, but when you see a guy get beat for a loose ball, it feels like a personal shot, because it feels like that is the one thing we should be able to win 9 times out of 10.
Well, that's what it is. It's the grit and it's the grind and it's the drive. And I think that, a lot of what the media talks about, as cliche as it is true. Not everyone is cut out to be a part of the Miami Heat organization. That doesn't mean that they're not good players. That doesn't mean that they're not team players, or that, they don't have a certain skill set that would be, attained and that would be valued. But there is something special about whatever group that comes through. And you see the guys who don't last. You see the guys who clearly don't make it. And you see the guys who honestly don't want to be a part of it. I think that, people hear stories, and there's that entire thing with Dion Waiters having come in and James Johnson having come in and seeing, this book of photos of the before and after when the guys came in and they were overweight. And then, it seems kind of corny maybe, and it seems kind of hard to believe, but Pat Riley's system works. There's a reason that this team has kind of held on to its reputation all these years, regardless of who's on the roster, regardless of how well they were doing, playoffs or not. There is something special about this team, and I really do think that it translates to the fans as well. Each fandom has kind of its own thing that they're known for, but Heat Twitter and just Heat Nation, they're such ride or die fans over the years that I think it does kind of just spill from the organization onto its fan base.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, and this is another thing, man, it's just I'm coming up with topics and topics and topics for future episodes. But one thing I think that kind of worries me at times about heat culture is that trap of we can make everyone better. And literally, I think this is a great idea for a whole other episode. But you have a player, and right now I'm thinking of Max Strus, for example. Max Strus is a
Mm-hmm.
good player. He shoots threes better than I thought. He does a little bit more than some of us thought, but I
Shout
think
out to the
sometimes,
fall.
yeah, sometimes it's easy to fall into that trap though, to think, oh, heat culture can just make him the next Duncan Robinson or the next this guy. And I think part of that is the heat system and everything, but sometimes it's also a crutch. There's a lot of sides to heat culture that we can and will talk about throughout the course of this. And so I'm very excited to do that. But like I said, it has its great moments and it has so much more good than bad. But there's also those moments of we think culture trumps everything. And it's like, no, sometimes you just need the most skilled player on the court too, so that it's just kind of interesting to think about it that way.
Well, let me ask you this. What are your favorite examples of heat culture over the years?
Man, you see, for me, my favorite examples of heat culture are probably going to be on the court moments. And so there are multiple. I mean, one of the most recent ones, and this is probably one of the most famous moments in Heat history in total. You've got, the Ray Allen 3-pointer in the finals, right? We all know the line: rebound Bosch, back out to Allen, his 3-pointer, bang. To me, the heat culture in that isn't so much Ray Allen's shot, which it is.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic shot. Huge part of why the team has the legacy that it has, but it's Bosch's rebound, right? It's the wherewithal to go inside and fight for it. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, the Spurs took out their big, so it was easy for him. He still had to go and jump over all those guys. He still had to be in the right place. And then to have that thought process to then immediately turn around and pass it, right? Like Chris Bosh, a very skilled player, learning to do all these other things. Great embodiment of heat culture. You've also got moments like Dwayne Wade dunking on Anderson Varejao, which I'll flex on this one a little bit. I was at that game, one of my favorite Heat games of all time. LeBron James comes down. He tries to dunk on Jermaine O'Neal, and he doesn't get it through. And you could just see Dwayne Wade just be like, you're not going to do my guy like that. I'm going to show you why. He goes and dunks on Anderson Varejao. He falls over. The entire arena completely lost its mind. It's those moments of fighting for your guys, doing that extra thing that isn't so much the skill, it's everything else. That to me is the embodiment of heat culture. Alonzo Mourning getting blocks in the finals. There's just so many examples, but those are the ones that I think of. But like I said, mine are mostly on the court. I feel like your best example of heat culture would probably be an off the court thing, no?
Yeah, and I think it's more so a common theme. To me, a big part of our culture is the fact that the front office can find diamonds in the rough. And I'm not saying that they turn out to be always elite players or players that necessarily even stick around. And I know I'm probably going to get flamed for this, but the whole Brothers Johnson movement was such a big thing for me. And it was because there was not a lot to hang on to at that time. Also, the fact that, JJ, he was on the Bulls. I liked him and I had been following him since Wake Forest. But let's be real, he was not a big name in the NBA. He had been kind of going from team to team. And Tyler Johnson came out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, during this kind of forgotten years of the Heat, they blew up into this whole story. And it was because of their brotherhood. It was because of the whole team kind of giving them the praise that they needed and the motivation to be better. I mean, UD was walking around with like JJ on his t-shirt. All the guys were praising Tyler Johnson, day in and day out. Sure, we can talk about the contract. It's a completely different point, but it's things like that where I really believe the culture came into play because Riley worked with what he had and he made sure that at that moment, his guys were going to be the best they can be. And that meant kind of building them up.
Man, it's funny that you mentioned that though, because didn't UD just get, was it a Tyler Johnson jersey signed when they played the Nets this past weekend?
I think so, because he got a Kelly Olynyk one tonight.
Yeah, and he put like 2 of 2. I think he got a Tyler Johnson one signed this past weekend. I didn't have a problem so much with Tyler Johnson. It was just a matter of he's not that good. Like, I agree with you. That is a good culture example. And I'm not going to take it away from you because they found a way to make what was just some awful seasons as a Heat fan. I mean, LeBron left and it just felt like a slow decay and then a cliff. And they found a way to make that fun and they were fighting for each other. And you had hope in that team. I mean, That's not, is that the same season where they go 31-11 in the second
I
half?
think so. When they went
Right,
from
with
11 to 30 to 30 and 11.
Philly
Yep.
cheese found a way to make it fun.
Yeah.
And I'm not the biggest Philly cheese fan, but that team had something about them that they always fought for each other. And it was cool to see. That was one example that I'd probably bring up another time of, culture takes you so far. But it's probably not going to take you much further, right? You need that alpha, you need the skill. And now we have a guy like Jimmy Butler, and Bam in this team was just in the NBA finals this past season. And I do not care what anybody else says. And we can just touch on this one real quick. That bubble, none of that to me was a fluke. None of that to me felt like a fluke. It felt like the rawest form of basketball. A lot of people call it a fluke. What is your response to those people? Because it feels like, hey, F off, losers. You're just jelly.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that the environment benefited the Miami Heat more than anyone. I think it just fit them. They are all about, playing ball when that's what needs to be done. And I think the bubble just took away everything else that a lot of other teams get tripped up with, whether that be distractions or traveling. I honestly do think if Goran was healthy, we would have won. And I can say that on record. I really think he would have been the difference maker. I think that unfortunately this season has come with its ups and downs, and maybe, people are comparing it, but I don't think that we were a fluke. I just think the environment worked for us and we worked hard and we were healthier.
We were healthier. We worked hard. I mean, we were healthier right up until the finals, which is a huge, huge bummer. But it was a great season. And then you go into this new season with a lot of high hopes. And I don't think we should spend too much time on trade talk today, or just really too much ever on this show. That's neither of our points of expertise, but it felt like this was the season of trades. From the moment the finals ended, it felt like it immediately got thrust onto everybody. And there was Giannis talk, and then there was Harden, and then it was Bradley Beal, and it was always these hopes, and it was always this stuff. And then you lost players to COVID. I mean, I live in Orlando, so I would say I know a thing or two about roller coasters. We don't have the wildest roller coasters here, but we have a lot of them. If this season hasn't been the wildest roller coaster of a season I have ever been a part of as a fan of the Miami Heat, I don't know what was. I mean, even the 31-11 season was more stable than what we're seeing so far this year. And that's not just a record thing. It's what we're seeing out on the floor, right? The way they're playing, the effort. One night you can have a player look like he doesn't belong in the NBA, and the next night he blows up for 25. What's happening? Like, I agree that culture is great, but this season feels far from culture just because of the inconsistencies. And that's outside of the COVID situation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of that is because you have so many new guys at this point coming out of, in comparison to what was in the bubble, culture takes time. And I think building that chemistry takes time. And I don't think we've had that. I think timing in general is a huge issue. Obviously, the offseason was extremely short for us. We have guys like Precious who would have needed time in the G League that didn't exist. There are new guys who, maybe if they didn't need to take the place of injured or unhealthy players, they would have had more time to acclimate to. So honestly, I really do think time and just health in general are kind of our biggest enemies at this point. I've been saying this though, the only consistency this year has been the inconsistency, and it's wild because it's not just one guy and it's not playing against certain teams. It is across the board. You have no idea who's going to come out and kill it one night. You have no idea, on offense or defense. We don't know. I mean, Spo's rotations, and I've been very vocal about kind of not really understanding what he's doing a lot of the time. He sat out basically none for 2-3 games for supposedly no reason because he was healthy. Even today, it ended up working, but I was shocked to see kind of Precious in the starting lineup. There's just a lot that has not been stable. And to your point, I think this is the wildest season we've ever seen as Heat fans.
Well, and it's not just that it's the wildest season. It's just so infuriating because you've seen all of them perform and do better. The only consistent player this season has been Jimmy Butler. Bam Adebayo, who is an amazing player, and I don't think either of us ever would call his max contract into question. I think he deserved that contract. I think there is no ceiling with Bam. That's a 5 reason. Sure, if you want to check it out, 5reasons.com. We have the merchandise, but there's a reason why that's the way we all talk about Bam. There's a reason why everyone sees him that way. There's a reason why Jimmy Butler feels like he can call Bam out after a horrible game against the Timberwolves. And then they can come back without Jimmy and beat the Nets. And then they can come back without Jimmy and Bam and Tyler and beat the Rockets, who I get it. The Rockets aren't a top level team.
That speaks a little bit to the culture because, and I tweeted this, Jimmy had been, kind of doing the same thing on other teams. He was calling people out, whether that be publicly to the media or in the locker room. And other guys did not like that. They didn't like the constructive criticism. They took it
Karl
as
Anthony Towns.
Well, yeah. I mean, especially in Minnesota, the Bulls somewhat, there are some things that I kind of heard with him kind of, especially after he left, things kind of got leaked there. But the Heat ran with it. They took it as what they needed to take it as, which is their leader wanting better for not just himself, but the whole team. And I do think that speaks to it. Other teams were not able to take that criticism and run with it. They felt like he was putting them down. But Bam, I mean, look at the game he had after what Jimmy said.
Yeah, Bam came back as a force, and then unfortunately his knee seemed not to be able to handle it. The Heat found a way to win against the Rockets tonight as well, which was amazing. Again, for anybody listening, we recorded the show on Monday night right after the Heat Rockets game. This season has been up and down. I still have some hope with the season, especially after the Victor Oladipo trade. We can talk about that on another pod, but just to kind of wrap this one up before we move on to the next segment, I would say that this season, to me, the goal is still Eastern Conference Finals if they're healthy. And it feels like that's a caveat that the Heat are never going to reach because it hasn't happened basically at all this season. I mean, in recent memory, you've got 4 games of Depot, and then he goes out, and then Jimmy has his ankle, and then Bam has his knee, and Goran's in and out, and it's all over the place, and it's unfortunate. But I think this team, if healthy, even though they haven't played a ton together, because of that culture, because of the defense first and the way everything else could flow, I still see Eastern Conference Finals as a reachable goal for them. What do you think?
Part of me wants to say you're crazy, but the other part of me is like, why not? Like this season is so up and down that anything is attainable at this point. It does worry me that health has been such a problem. I think there have been other seasons in which, for maybe 3-4 weeks, it seemed like every night someone went out, but then it stabilized. We have had no period of time, it seems like, where everything and everyone was okay. But I don't know, maybe this is the turnaround point. I know I feel like I say this every time we win. I'm like, this is it, the bounce back game. But at the very least, I know that this team is going to keep fighting, and that's definitely something that can never be taken away from them.
Okay, for anybody listening, what that silence was I was trying to feed us to the next point, which I had texted Allana about. We're apparently not doing that. So I'll ask the question. I think this season has been incredibly inconsistent. I think one player that has really kind of jumped to the front of that inconsistency is the boy wonder, if that's what you want to call him.
And you wonder why I wasn't jumping to this topic.
Leave the dad jokes to me because it is not your thing. Oh my goodness. Wow, that was bad. But Tyler Herro has been up and down. And before we get into what we wanted to discuss about Tyler Herro tonight, quick preview as to what you guys can expect moving forward. We have a lot of different topic ideas. Most of them were actually come up with by Allana. Allana, what were some of those ideas you had on some segments we can do moving forward? Because this is about the Heat. It's about Heat culture and everything going on. So what we're going to talk about in future episodes?
Well, we've got some exciting things on Style Corner, first of all, which Michael's going to hate, but I'm going to educate him on all things, streetwear, fashion, and so on. I would also just love to kind of talk about players that, we think would fit the Heat culture moving forward. As a sneak peek, I definitely think that there's a lot to be said about Kawhi Leonard. I think that's going to be a fun kind of back and forth conversation to have with you, Michael, here. I think that to your earlier point with UD kind of shouting out both Kelly and Tyler Johnson, once part of the Heat family, kind of always part of the Heat family. So we're definitely going to, take a look at some of the prior Heat players and what they're doing now. So we've got a lot of stuff in store for you guys, and we're open to any suggestions. And, we appreciate you listening and coming on this journey with us.
Yeah, we're going to have Heat Twitter talks. We're also going to recap the past week of games in about 5 to 10 minutes. Again, like we talked about, it's not, we like analyzing the games, but we also just kind of enjoy watching them. And I feel like there's like 2 hats I put on, which is like watching or analyzing. And it's kind of hard to do both, right? Because one, you kind of have to watch what happens off the ball. And I don't mind doing it. To the people that can do both, major props to them, because that takes a lot of skill. But sometimes I like just being able to sit back, not have to worry about tweeting out anything, and just enjoying the game, right? Just like taking it in. We will talk about off the court stuff, and one off the court thing that we wanted to touch on because it's so at the front of all this, like we talked about, is Tyler Herro, Boy Wonder. Boy Wonder gone rogue? Is that what we want to call it? You know, a celebrity gone wild.
I don't want to call it that, because I think this whole narrative, actually, one of my friends texted me today and he was like, comment on this. And I'm like, no, I hate this narrative. I have no comment on this.
And what is the narrative, though? What is the narrative for people that may not know?
Listen, apparently there is a narrative going around that Tyler is a little bit too famous, and that is what's taking away from his on-court presence. For those of you who don't know, Tyler has, you know, some sponsorships floating out there. He has his own cereal. He has his own Chipotle bowl. I don't know if there's anything else going on right now, but I'm sure he's in development. I say good for him. You need, side hustles. You need side endeavors. You need to have a little bit more than that. I also honestly find it hard to believe that having a Chipotle bowl is messing with his on-court game. Like, do you know how ridiculous that sounds?
Have you ever tried to eat Chipotle right before playing basketball? I'm sure it's rough. I'm sure it makes you a little sluggish.
You think Tyler Herro is sitting there eating his own Chipotle bowl, and that's what's slowing him down? Because he looks quick out there. In fact, he looks like he's galloping like a gazelle.
Galloping like a gazelle. Listen, he cannot blow by anybody unless somebody sets a screen for him. We can talk about that some other time. We both know that to be true. I will say I don't disagree with the side hustle piece. I think if you're an NBA player, make your money. Do what you got to do. I'm never going to ask a player to step back and not take an endorsement deal, to not try to maximize their personality. What I think has been brought up is a little bit of the worry of, you know, you're selling out all this stuff. What have you done? And he's a good player. I think his ceiling is a lot higher than a lot of people may think. But he was a 37-point performance in the Eastern Conference Finals. Sure. He was a good rookie. He wasn't, I don't remember if he was first rookie all-team or if he was second.
I think he was second, but I might be wrong.
Right. And he wasn't in the top of rookie of the year voting. It's just like you're putting the cart. I just feel like he's putting the cart before the horse. And again, I'm not going to tell him to not do his side hustle. That's fine. But it's like,
what people need to realize is he is in no position, and nor would I think anyone would be, to turn things down. So for people to kind of, be putting this on him, like, oh, why do you have these deals, or this should not be what you're doing at this point in your career. He's not approaching these brands. You think he walked up to Chipotle and was like, yo, I want my own bowl? Like, that's just not how this works. And so I'm
sure that's not what it is. And I'm sure Katya walked up to him as well. Like I'm sure people are just going to him for whatever the situations are. My one thing is, and I will say this in his defense, if you're going to make that argument for Tyler Herro, I think you can make the same argument for Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson started a podcast. He had a podcast that I think it was this season he began doing it. He has struggled mightily. Right? You could say, well, he did a podcast and then it struggled, so maybe he should stop doing the podcast.
Here's
right?
Just my problem with this narrative. If I felt like Tyler was the kind of guy who was kind of flippant, or he didn't necessarily think he was doing poorly, or he didn't show signs of, frustration and wanting to get better, then yeah, maybe I could say he's only here for X, Y, and Z, or he's just coasting. There have been plenty of moments, and even in the game, I don't know if you like to do this. I watch the bench a lot, like probably more than I should be, because there's actually play happening. There are times when he is so frustrated with himself, he's literally asking guys, like, and you can see it through the body language, like, how can I get better? Or like, what should I have done there? He cares. He said it in interviews. He's genuine, at least I believe he is, when he's talking about kind of, I'm not playing my role, I want to do more. So again, I think my problem with the narrative is if he was showing any signs of, I'm too good for this, or I don't really care about what's happening on the court, yeah, okay, you could say that. He's not having a good season. He is in a slump. Things are not going well for him. I'm sure some of that could be on him, but I don't think it's on him in the way that people are trying to make it seem with all these endorsements.
Yeah, and my last thought on it is just going to be this. It's, if he is still putting in the amount of work that he should, right? He's still putting in the same amount of work that he did when he first came in and everybody praised him for, then I don't think anybody can or should have any problems with any of this. I cannot say that for a fact is my only caveat. So if
Mhm.
the reports are true and the Heat are worried about it, the Heat are saying it seems like he's treating it differently, then that's my one place where I'm going to, view it a little bit differently. I don't want him to think I did great last season. I can work a little bit less now. And I'm not saying he's doing that. But if he is, that would be my issue. But if he's still working just as hard as he did last season, if not more, and he's struggling happens. I'm not going to base it just off of that. So if he's still doing that, fine. Go get your Chipotle money. Go sell your fake Cheerios or whatever it is. I still got to find a
I
box. I
have
mean,
a
it sounds like,
box. I
but you
have a
haven't eaten
box.
it.
I'm not gonna eat it. It's just sitting on my bookshelf along with my other NBA stuff. I'm never eating
The
that.
fact that that's on a bookshelf with other NBA stuff is the one place though where I'm like, I feel like,
You think it should just be in my like kitchen cabinet? It's
no, but
beautiful.
like
It's
I
a
have the
beautiful
signed picture of
box.
Dwayne Wade, right? Like that would be
I
top
have a
shelf.
Miami Heat signed ball in a glass right next to it, and then a
Okay, you
signed
see, and
Mellow
that's what I'm saying.
Nuggets
No. The
jersey.
signed basketball should be on like the top rung, and then the cereal should be on like rung
No, because
3.
it's all the rungs are taken up. I don't have enough
Oh, but
room.
that's what I'm saying. To me, it's not on the same level. Like I'll put it up there when he deserves to be up there.
No, it's just the colors. It looks good. What I want to say, and lastly on this topic is, as tight-lipped as the Heat are, I find it very hard to believe that anyone would outwardly show concern about anything. And so I'm having a little bit hard of a time believing that anyone in the organization, even if they feel that way, would come out and say, we're worried about Tyler because of his X, Y, and Z endeavors. So I'm just going to call BS on this entire thing. I think it's stupid. I will not disagree that Tyler's not having a bad season, but I don't think it has anything to do with his like outside the court happenings.
You said Tyler's not having a bad season. The answer is Tyler is having a bad season. I'm just going to
I'm
correct you
not
there.
going to say Tyler's not having a bad season.
Maybe I'm just confused with all the double negatives. Who knows? Words are difficult. All right. I'm a numbers guy, but that was our, and this, it's like when you watch a movie and then someone says the title of the movie at one point, you're like, oh, they said it right. This was an intro to culture, which is going to be the title of this podcast episode. And I'm very happy to have said the title because it makes you feel like a little nerd and it's fun. We are going to talk about a bunch of different things on the court, off the court, social media presences, style, which I will know absolutely nothing about. The way the team is done the last
by
week.
the time I'm done with you.
So she says, we will talk about a lot of different things. You can follow us on a bunch of different social media platforms. You can watch a bunch of our things on YouTube. Every once in a while, we appear on post-game shows. We do Clutch Corner. Allana, what are our handles? I want to see if you know my handle. I'm really curious, actually. Just announce your handle first, and then what's mine?
You can find me at Allana Tachauer on both Twitter and Instagram.
And how do you spell that?
I was about to get to that. It's ALLANATACHAUER.
So
Michael, my dad's gonna come after you for that one. He's not gonna like someone slandering his family pride. Yours is Michael 5RSN.
There you go. Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Listen, I pay attention. Michael has some really funny tweets lately. You guys should go follow him for sure.
Yeah. Today I tweeted about Avery Bradley finally playing in Miami. It was just, he put on the wrong shirt, F me. But that is what the show is about. We want to thank you guys so much for listening. We're going to keep working on the show, keep trying to bring you guys good content. This show is going to come out once a week, and once a month we will have a bonus stream on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. So you can see our
beautiful faces and interact with us in the comments. We're very excited to kind of meet all of you virtually in this crazy time of life that we're in.
You can see my beautiful face, and then you'll see Allana's next to that face. So that is the show. We want to thank you guys again so much for listening. Don't forget to check out all the great stuff on 5 Reasons YouTube, the 5 Reasons podcast, like 5 on the Floor. If you like Dolphins content, 3 yards per carry, there's a whole lot of stuff going on. You want to make sure not to miss that. Any final words, Allana?
This is our bounce back game.
Wow, this is our bounce back game. The Heat are back. Allana said it. Take it to the bank.